This video really flipped on its head. I thought this was gonna be a rare occurrence where an MMO was actually unproblematic, but never mind. I came across a Chit Chat City wiki page. It was entitled "Why Chit Chat City Was a Piece of Shit." This was accompanied by a nearly 3,000 word document. Hi, hello, welcome to today's video. My name is Otter. If you have been to my channel before, hello, hi, welcome. It is really lovely to see you again. And if you haven't been to my channel before, hello, hi, welcome. It is really lovely to meet you. This video is going to be all about the MMO Chit Chat City. Now, it definitely doesn't rank high on my list in terms of visual and graphical design. The thing that really drew me to talking about Chit Chat City was the accessible creative opportunities that it gave its players and the absolute bombshell of drama that I found whilst editing, but we're going to talk about that later. But before we start talking about Chit Chat City, I always ask that if you do find yourself enjoying today's video at any point, it would really help me out if you could leave this video a like and consider subscribing to join the Otter Den. But without further ado, let's jump straight on in and learn all about the history of Chit Chat City. Chit Chat City was founded in the year of 2010 by a single developer named Matt. Like most MMOs of the time, the game was completely free to play and had a mixture of 2 and 3D graphics, a 2D environment that you can build in, and 3D looking avatars and items that you can literally draw yourself. Socializing is obviously a big part of the world and game of Chit Chat City like any other MMO, but it seems its main draw and player focus was on the creative aspects of the site. And it really does remind me of Second Life, or like a simplified version of Second Life with more accessible and easy to learn game mechanics to allow people to create items to sell in game. After creating a basic avatar, you entered the game and could choose from different cities to explore, which kind of worked like individual chat rooms. These were all themed differently and featured individual reasons to spend time in each one. For example, in the cemetery, you could meet up with your pals and kill zombies, or go to Fishing City and go fishing. Now, each location, I think, had a separate minigame. I'm not sure if all of them did, but the ones that I previously mentioned definitely did. Besides being a way to just spend your time, these location-specific activities could lead you to earn the in-game currency credits. These were free and could be collected fairly easily by engaging with the site regularly, most notably by spinning a daily wheel or completing quests, one of which included returning a lost puppy to its owner. I couldn't actually find any other quests. I don't know if over Chit Chat City's lifetime there was any like seasonal quests going on or anything, but the finding the puppy one was the first real quest that you had in game. And obviously we have our premium currency, gold, which was available to buy with real world money. I feel like Chit Chat City as a whole had a pretty good system set up in that the selling and like location buying mechanic was available to every player, no matter whether you purchase gold or premium currency or not. Once players had saved up 10,000 credits, they could then purchase their own plot of land. Although lots bought in specific places would cost the player a little bit more. For example, house lots bought in Shopping City were reserved for shops and they cost 10,000 credits monthly to upkeep. And the customization for these, and in general, with the whole game, is pretty much endless. You can edit every single part of a building that you have on your property, including building it entirely from scratch with items that players could create and add to the games themselves. Some popular creators were able to gain a following online and in-game from their online creations. Players created their own items, set a price, and then once sold would receive 50% of the sale. I'm assuming the other 50% would go to Chit Chat City. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, the visuals and graphical design of this game are not the best and do not impress me very much, especially when compared to some other MMOs that we've looked at before. Although I do think that this then leaves more opportunity for players' creativity to shine, as some of the players' lots and like home builds are really impressive. I also feel like the base avatars that they give you are really creepy, and they are a little bit off-putting. They kind of make me think of those like creepy porcelain dolls that just like float around in charity shops. I used to have one in my bedroom as a kid and I was obsessed with her. And to be honest, I think it does make sense that they did this, as I don't know if this was intentional, but the way that they look kind of reminds me of a mannequin, or makes me think of like a blank canvas ready to be drawn on, which makes sense when you think about the amount of autonomy that Chit Chat City was given players to create in the game. You can literally draw your own avatar. Like, it's such a cool thing, which I feel like is so simple, and I'm not really sure if any other MMO has done this, where a player can literally wipe their avatar clean, like body and all, and then just redraw something brand new from scratch. You want to be an avatar that resembles you exactly? Go for it. You want to present as the grumpy cat meme? Go for it. Just as a side note to this as well, there was a type of avatar called a paper avi, which were really highly regarded in the community, and people who could create these were really, really popular and could sell for quite high prices in the game. Which is really interesting to me because as someone outside of the community, they look less graphically appealing than the avatars that are given to you in the game. Then again, they do have a lot more detail and creative opportunities to be able to be whoever or whatever you want, so I can understand why they perhaps were more appealing to players at the time. And with this freedom of creativity in mind, I really, really hope that this was policed and monitored well, because you can only imagine, given the type of people that are normally drawn to playing these MMOs sometimes, the creations that people might have come up with. I don't think it was ever explicitly aimed at children, but it is that sort of like tween young adult market. Above everything that I've already mentioned about Chit Chat City, I think the main thing that I find really wholesome about this site was the way that it enabled people from subcultures or people with common interests to join together and create lots and spaces to be able to hang out online. I saw a lot of My Little Pony builds. For example, there was a My Little Pony high school, there was a lot of Adventure Time, and various others sort of like cultural influences like anime and a lot of gaming stuff. Given the sort of stuff that I was seeing on here, I can only imagine that the type of people that were creating these spaces potentially were feeling like they couldn't express these interests or things that they loved in the real world, but Chit Chat City gave them an opportunity to do that. Because when you think about that time period of the 2010s, I specifically remember people who enjoyed Adventure Time being made fun of at my school because they watched and enjoyed a cartoon. I can imagine that people were using Chit Chat City as a safe space to be able to share their passions and interests with other like-minded people. And this opportunity to be able to build communities of people with similar passions and interests really brought traction to Chit Chat City's socialization and popularity, as without this, it's kind of like a less impressive version of Second Life. This user had also commented on a Reddit post. There was also a big text roleplay community in the forums. Threads would go on for months. Unfortunately, the forums got shut down in favour of the in-game groups feature, which IMO was not a good replacement, as it required you to be in-game to talk with others. And I feel that the early 2010s is really where the virtual world phenomena was in its prime and was at its biggest, so you can only imagine how many people were involved in this site and the communities that were created from it. And in my opinion, the fact that Chit Chat City went out of their way to implement an in-game forum chat group thing shows that they were engaged enough with their players to know that this was what was driving the success of the game, and it was a big part of why people loved and enjoyed Chit Chat City as a site. And like I mentioned before, I really don't know much about the team behind Chit Chat City, but this is a really green flag for me. I really do believe that there is a curse on me, as whenever I make long videos like this, I always find that during the editing, I will discover a piece of information that varies from not very vital but could have been included to pretty vital, changes the whole perspective of the world or game that we are looking at. And in this case, it was the latter. Initially, when I first filmed this video, I only found one piece of drama or controversy which seemed of any sort of influence or had any sort of impact on the site as a whole. The main thing that I found was a petition which asked for tighter regulations around copying and reselling other players' creations. However, this also didn't have much footing, as the player who created the petition was called out by the George Bush, claiming that the person who made it actually did the exact thing that they were calling others out for. And they kind of undermined the whole petition and its value, so even that felt like a little bit of a stretch to include. So here I was, editing away at my raw cut of my Chit Chat City video, when I came across a Chit Chat City wiki page which really caught me off guard. It was entitled "Why Chit Chat City Was a Piece of," embellished with the classic Kermit drinking tea gif. And this really was an omen from the gods that the script that I had filmed, read, and started editing was now pointless. Well, not so much pointless. The majority of what I've said is true, but my emphasis on the site being uncontroversial, not so true. Upon further investigating, I found that this was not just a wiki fan page of a player complaining about their experiences with Chit Chat City. No, this was accompanied by a nearly 3,000 word document. This document was created by a previous player named Grensnes, who described the extremely negative experience they had with the site, including fellow players, mods, and devs. They also go into detail about their personal and mental health issues, so trigger warnings in advance if you do choose to go and read this document. For the content of this video, I will not be addressing any sort of personal relationships or mental health issues that the player experienced during their time playing Chit Chat City. I will only be reflecting on specific examples where they comment on the devs or the team or anything that would affect players as a whole across the entire site. This is mainly so that I can remain objective to the overall experience of the site for the entire player base. They also talk about some issues in their personal life that I do not feel comfortable discussing in this video. And I don't want to give the impression that I am undermining or ignoring their experiences in real life and how Chit Chat City may have caused or made these worse. So to summarize the document, the player describes their experiences on the site, some intense relationships they had, but more importantly, they talk a lot about the development team behind Chit Chat City. They describe how the site grew to peak popularity from 2010 to 2015, with Matt, the only professional team member working on Chit Chat City, generating a moderator team over this time with no other professional influence. According to Grensnes, the mods that were adults were immature and unhelpful too, in particular calling out Red Skull, who put barriers between herself and the community, and Knight, who was allegedly an art thief. They also directly attack Matt quite a lot in this document, calling him careless, uninterested, lazy, impatient, condescending, self-entitled, and incredibly stuck up. Some behavioural examples given that reflect this are not replying to players' questions in-game or out-of-game through emails, not responding to bug reports, and building a pedestal for himself in-game. They essentially round off the document or letter by proclaiming their joy at the end of Chit Chat City and their hopes that the people that they discuss get the karma that they deserve. Personally, after reflecting on this document, analysing it, and going through the internet to find any sort of evidence that I could, I've come to the decision that as much as this document does have some truth to it, some of those truths do have a little bit of embellishment, if you will. Before we go into my analysis and discussion of the evidence that I found, I do really hope that Grensnes, the person who wrote the document, is happy and healthy in real life and is okay, and that they have much more healthy and positive relationships online. If we take a wider lens and look at Chit Chat City from the perspective of someone who didn't play the game and also from the perspective of the team behind it, it is run by a whole team of one person. Compared to other sites that had whole funded teams and companies behind them, it's no wonder perhaps Matt came across as lazy and unengaged. Realistically, if you're single-handedly running a site, updating a site, maintaining the servers and things like that, you're not going to have time to engage and interact with players in-game in real time. To Matt's credit, no matter what they did or didn't do, they single-handedly kept that site alive for 8 years, and I can imagine they were juggling a lot behind the scenes to be able to do that. So I don't really think it's fair to call him out on the fact that he wasn't engaging or interacting or answering every single question that he was receiving, because it was literally just him. Yes, he had his team of mods that he developed, but being a moderator and being a developer of a site and actually working on the site behind the scenes are two very, very different things. However, the ability to keep a site running for 8 years does not speak for your personality or how you may have interacted with players. There does seem to be some evidence out there of the claims that Matt became self-entitled once the site grew in popularity. I found this image of Chit Chat City on its 4th birthday, where an event was planned, the moderators were all going to be there, and Matt himself was going to make a rare appearance. Here you can visually see that Matt and the mods are literally separating themselves from the other players and putting themselves on pedestals for everyone to see and look at. Depending on how the event was planning out, whether there was going to be a Q&A, discussions, things like that, it would be a lot easier for the amount of players that were there to be able to read and keep up with questions and answers if the mods and Matt himself were kept separate so their speech bubbles were more visible. Now, this decision in itself is not so much a problem, but the further implications of classism and superiority complexes definitely are. which, as we know, is a common thing that occurs on virtual worlds and MMOs in the 2010s. Matt is also criticised for not updating the rules in-game for players to be able to see how their accounts will be affected if they are accused of doing specific things. Gresnes cites a specific example, which is that people who were scamming or were scammers had their accounts suspended, which they found out themselves by pretending to be a scammer and receiving a 4-hour account suspension. And I mean, come on. I think this is obvious that this is going to happen. Even kids know that scamming and scammers are bad, and if you are pretending to be a scammer, no matter how obvious you make it, if someone comes into a server at a point where you are actively pretending to scam people, of course they're going to pull you up on it. And if anything, I'd say this is a good thing, as it means that Matt and the moderation team were actively looking out for this and acting upon it to some degree. I don't think you should be annoyed that your account got suspended because you were doing this and you got caught out on it. Even if you weren't actually actively scamming people, you were acting like a scammer, so of course there's going to be a consequence. In terms of the other accusations against Matt, there's very little about him socializing with players out there, so I'm not entirely sure whether they're true or not. That obviously doesn't mean that they did or didn't happen. They could have happened, we just won't know. Now, the accusations against the moderators are a little bit different. As mods normally enforce site rules, I do think it's important and healthy to have boundaries in between mods and players. This helps prevent favoritism, bias, or elitism when they are enforcing the rules of the site upon players. And one of the things that Gresnes specifically calls out against one of the moderators is that they had boundaries between themselves and the players, which, as long as they were done in a way that reflects professionalism, I don't have a problem with, and I think is, again, a good thing, and definitely shouldn't be taken to heart or as personal insult. When it comes to these boundaries for Chit Chat City, they were definitely a little blurred, and it kind of feels like the plot of The Lord of the Flies. If you don't know it, look it up now, where you kind of select a few privileged people and then watch society develop. Especially when you remember that some of these mods were as young as 12 and 13 years old and were selected from the player base to moderate the site. And I think as a moderator, it can be really hard to make some of the decisions that they have to, especially when it's like a morally grey area or there's people arguing and there's lots of different accounts about who did what and when and how. It can be hard to make those decisions, and it takes an adult, logical mind to separate the facts between fiction and make a good decision. And given that the Chit Chat City mods seem to have a pretty big influence over the site, it's kind of worrying that players as young as 12, no matter how responsible or mature they may seem, were given this power. As well as having influence over the site, they also were sometimes used as a vessel to communicate through by Matt. Now, there was one moderator in particular who was called out specifically by Gresnes, and that was Red Skulls, and who luckily has a huge Chit Chat City internet footprint. As Red Skull was a pretty pivotal and influential moderator on Chit Chat City as a site, I'm going to use them as a case study and as an example as to how the moderators may have behaved and acted on Chit Chat City. I in no way mean to specifically target them or blame them for any sort of moderator issue that occurred across Chit Chat City at all in its whole lifetime, but rather that they are specifically mentioned and a rare source of a huge amount of evidence that was created by them themselves, not through word of mouth or by another person or like gossip or drama. Also, on the back of that, I am not implying that every moderator definitely behaved this way, encouraged this behavior, or partook in behavior like this. I'm just using it as an example as to how other moderators may have behaved. Because if this is how the head moderator was acting and showing themselves and presenting themselves to the Chit Chat City community, imagine how people with less responsibility were acting. For a little bit of background on Red themselves, they were head moderator and also later assigned head of events. If their Facebook page tells me anything, it seems that they were an incredibly active mod in Chit Chat City's community all the way back to 2013, with quite close relations to Matt. One of the accusations that Gresnes made was they claimed that Matt and the moderators were lazy, and I wouldn't go as far as to call them lazy, maybe a little bit ignorant to what was actually happening on the site, but it does seem that they really cared about the site and keeping it alive. Now, the Facebook page that I found is definitely owned by Red Skull, and I guess in some sort of argument it could be labeled as a personal Facebook account where they have the right to say and put anything they want. However, not only are they using a variation of their in-game username, but they are actively discussing and asking actual players to engage with content about Chit Chat City, meaning that they are using the site to partially fulfill their moderator roles, which sets a precedent of professionalism and maturity. I do think they genuinely cared for Chit Chat City, as I mentioned, and definitely put a lot of effort into the planning and the way that they were involved with the site. And most of the content on this page does seem to align with Chit Chat City and the roles that they were given. It also encourages positivity on the site, gives announcements, and asks for player opinions. But there are some more interesting posts that just outright have nothing to do with the game or indicate that there may actually be some truth to Grensnes's claims on their document on the behaviour of mods. Now, I do not know anyone that I mentioned in this video personally, nor do I know how old Red Skull was at the time when these posts were being made. Grensnes did specifically point out Red Skull and Knight as two adult moderators, so we can assume that they are at least 16, maybe even at least 18, but I don't know for sure. But what I do know for sure is that we can see some demonstrations of the alleged immaturity through the posts on this Facebook page. The inclusion of irrelevant content, including discussions of intense family issues, language used on posts and responses, hypocritical posts of gossip and sharing of questionable quotes are evidence of this being true. And the irrelevant posts that we see towards the beginning of the postings in 2013 definitely does fizzle out a little bit towards like the end of Chit Chat City's lifetime. And there still does seem to be a lot of posts that are more related to personal drama as a player rather than site-specific issues as a moderator. I also found one really interesting post, which seemed like the WordPress version of a YouTube apology. It seems that both Red Skull and another moderator named Venus had been on a spree of fighting and being mean to other mods and players on Chit Chat City, where they were obviously called out enough that a public apology was required. Obviously, we don't know the full story and probably will never know the full story behind a lot of these arguments and occurrences. The bulk of the apologies were from Red, and when you actually take the time to read them, most of them are incredibly backhanded and actually shift the blame onto something or someone else. For example, I owe you an apology even though I was never mean to your face. I don't know if you hate me or if we were really friends. It's hard to tell since I don't really understand much of what you talked about since I was not all into the fashion collections or kept up with the latest trends. But I guess it's not really your fault that I didn't understand or really care to try to be hip with what was popular. And as much as I can imagine that these apologies were sincere and were actually meant to apologize to the person intended, they do come across as a little bit sarcastic and backhanded when read. There is also a general overall apology by Red Skull specifically at the end of the specific apologies. Basically just goes out to anyone that they may have been mean to, which implies that this behavior was occurring beyond close friends or other mods, and kind of makes me think that they were just going out into the game and potentially being mean, whatever that means, to other players, and perhaps at such a rate and amount that they couldn't remember or like actually list everyone that they may have affected by the behavior. Now, it definitely feels a lot like playground politics, just translated into a virtual world. Things like this that occurred in these virtual worlds had real-world consequences on people's mental health and well-being. And while this playground politic-esque behaviour occurred on many other sites and was not unique to Chit Chat City alone, I think that these specific occurrences that we found on Red Skull's page does echo the rhetoric that Grensnes was describing in their document. In reflection of everything we've just discussed, I just do want to state again that I am not specifically targeting Red Skull, and I do not mean for any hate to go their way. I hope that they are well, they are happy and healthy, having a great life. I am just using their evidence that is out there on the internet as a case study against Grensnes's document and accusations. Overall, I do not agree with Grensnes's claim that Chit Chat City was a piece of shit. By all means, it definitely was not a perfect game. It had toxicity and problems and issues, but these are not unique to Chit Chat City alone and are seen across the many virtual worlds and MMOs that were released at a similar time and in a similar format to Chit Chat City. The problem isn't with the game itself, but rather people who were given a platform within the game and misused it. And I think that's why Grensnes had such a big issue with Chit Chat City as a site overall, as when you boil down much of the points that they are making in the document, it all comes down to specific interactions and relationships with people who use the site. And at the end of the day, if you were choosing to mix and push yourself into this toxic part of MMOs, then there is a chance that you won't be chosen to be a moderator or be favoritized. People hid behind screens and it was a really easy way for people to bully other players. And you will be pushed out of groups and separated from other people because that is how the microcosms of society works in these virtual worlds. It's how they run, it's how they make their money. I'm not saying it's okay, I'm not saying it's right, it's just what it was at the time, and we can't change that now. And besides this, beyond this video and what I've already discussed, there will be hundreds and thousands of people who interacted with Chit Chat City and have incredibly positive interactions and experiences with the site. As I've mentioned in this video a couple of times, I really praise Chit Chat City for the opportunities for creative outlet that it gave and the potential safe space that it gave for people with non-conventional interests. And I think it's really unfair to tar the entirety of Chit Chat City with that same brush, because the problems and issues that were happening to people like Grensnes were because of particular people on the site, not because of the site itself. Chit Chat City closed down on the 1st of August of 2018. The main reason I see online as to why the site closed is because there was a falling player base, which makes total sense if you think about the lifetime of Chit Chat City. If you started playing Chit Chat City in 2010 when it was released and you were 10, by 2018 you are now a fully fledged adult, a very different person, going on into life, doing different things. You're not going to be as engaged with these virtual worlds as you were when you were a kid. If you weren't aware, and I'm assuming if you are watching this video, you play Chit Chat City and probably know, there is a nearly exact replica of Chit Chat City out there called Cosmos, I think. The website seems to have had some issues in terms of domain expiration, and their socials were last updated in March of 2024. I did also join the Discord and no one has spoken on there in a little while, and the last update was in March of 2024. So I have no idea if it's actually running, and I'm not willing to sign up to find out as I value my personal information too much and don't want them sold to scammers like they were for Club Penguin rewritten. If you play Chit Chat City and you have any memories or opinions that you would like to share down below, please feel free to discuss them with me. Also, I invite you to correct me if I have made any mistakes in this video, although I do only invite these out of kindness. I do not make mistakes on purpose. There is no reason to be rude, mean, or just horrible. Also, if you want to see many more videos like this one, don't forget to leave this one a like and consider subscribing to join the Otter Den. But for now, I'm gonna leave you, hydrate to stay great, get your daily calorie intake, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.